I never imagined that a single voice could shape my world. Not until I met her. It wasn't love at first sight, no grand gestures or cinematic moments. It was simpler, quieter, like the slow tide reshaping the shore. From the moment we crossed paths, she became a part of my life in a way I never expected, a presence so constant that I only realized its weight when it was gone. Her name was Myra. A childhood friend, a confidant, a sister in everything but blood. We grew up in the same neighborhood, bound by shared secrets and whispered dreams beneath flickering streetlights. Myra had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, of turning the dullest days into something worth remembering. She was the kind of person who laughed with her whole body, who made silence comfortable, who carried the world's weight yet never let it show. And then, she vanished. I still remember the last time we spoke. It was autumn, the air crisp with the scent of burning leaves. We sat on the old wooden bench at the park, the same place we had claimed as our own since childhood. Myra seemed distant that day, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the worn-out wood. "I need to tell you something," she had said, her voice unusually subdued. I should have listened more closely, should have caught the hesitation in her words, the way her hands trembled just slightly. But I was distracted, caught up in the noise of life, in the illusion that there would always be more time. "What is it?" I had asked, but before she could answer, my phone rang. A trivial call, a meaningless distraction. By the time I turned back to her, the moment had passed. She smiled, one of those practiced smiles that never quite reach the eyes. "Nothing," she said. "It's not important." I let it go. The next day, Myra was gone. No note, no goodbye, just a hollow absence where she used to be. I searched, called, asked everyone we knew. But it was as if she had been erased from the world, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. Now, years later, I find myself sitting on that same bench, tracing the same invisible patterns on the wood, wondering what I had missed. The silence feels heavier without her, the air colder, the echoes of her laughter distant yet painfully close. What had she wanted to tell me that day? Why had she left without a word? And most of all, was I somehow to blame? I don't know if I'll ever find the answers. But what I do know is this: some absences never fade. Some ghosts aren't seen but felt. And Myra, whether near or far, will always be the voice in the quiet, the shadow in the spaces between memory and regret. Myra's absence was not a sudden storm but a slow unraveling, a thread pulled loose from the fabric of my life until I no longer recognized its shape. At first, I convinced myself she would return, that she had simply needed space. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The world moved forward, indifferent to the void she left behind. I clung to memories. The late-night conversations under flickering streetlights, where we whispered about futures we were too young to understand. The way she always carried a book, scribbling notes in the margins as if she were having a conversation with the author. How she hated goodbyes, always opting for a casual see you later, as if parting was never permanent. But something had changed in the months before she disappeared. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle but undeniable. She had grown quieter, her laughter less frequent. There were moments when I would catch her staring into the distance, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. I remember one evening when we sat on her rooftop, the city stretched beneath us in a sea of golden lights. She was tracing constellations with her finger, her voice softer than usual. "Do you ever feel like you're meant to be somewhere else?" she had asked. The question had caught me off guard. "Like moving to another city?" She had hesitated, then shaken her head. "No. Not a place. Just somewhere else." I had laughed it off, thinking it was one of her poetic musings, another layer to her endless curiosity. I didn't press, didn't ask what she really meant. Now, I wonder if that was the moment I lost her. I started searching for clues, retracing our last days together. I visited her favorite bookstore, hoping she had left behind something, anything. The owner, an elderly man who knew us by name, only shook his head. "She stopped coming months ago," he said. Seemed troubled. Said she was looking for answers. Looking for answers. The words gnawed at me. What had Myra been searching for? And why hadn't she told me? One evening, in a desperate attempt to hold on to her, I visited her empty apartment. Dust settled on surfaces untouched for too long. The air carried a scent that was almost hers, but faded, like an echo of something once vibrant. That's when I found it. Tucked between the pages of a book she had left behind was a single note, folded carefully. My hands trembled as I opened it, Myra's handwriting instantly familiar. "I'm sorry. I had to go. Please don't look for me." A chill ran through me. The words felt final, yet they only deepened the mystery. Why had she felt the need to disappear? And more importantly, what had she been running from? The note haunted me. I read it over and over, as if the ink might shift beneath my gaze and reveal something more. But the words never changed. "I'm sorry. I had to go. Please don't look for me." It wasn't just the message that unsettled me, it was the certainty in her handwriting. Myra had always been a person of unfinished sentences, of half-thoughts spoken aloud. But this was absolute. I should have let it go. Maybe she had wanted me to. But the emptiness she left behind gnawed at me, refusing to be ignored. So I searched. I went through her belongings, flipping through old journals, reading the words she had once kept private. Fragments of thoughts, cryptic phrases, nothing made sense until I found a single recurring theme, a name scribbled in the margins of her books, underlined in the corners of her notes, the hollow ones. The words sent a shiver through me. They meant nothing and yet felt heavy, as if carrying a weight I couldn't yet understand. I started asking questions, following the trail she had left behind. At first, people brushed me off. Myra always had her head in strange ideas, they said. She was probably chasing another mystery. But there was a hesitation in their voices, a reluctance in their eyes, as if they knew more than they were willing to say. And then I found someone who did talk. It was an old classmate of ours, someone Myra had been close to years ago but had drifted from. When I mentioned the hollow ones, her face went pale. "You shouldn't be looking into this," she whispered. "Myra did, and now she's gone." A chill settled over me. "What do you mean? Do you know where she went?" She shook her head, eyes darting toward the exit as if she were afraid to even be seen speaking to me. "She was convinced they were real," she murmured. "That they were watching. That they were waiting for her." It sounded absurd. Impossible. But Myra had believed it. Enough to run. Enough to leave behind everything she knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow stretched too long, every whisper of wind sounded like something unseen moving just beyond my reach. I told myself it was paranoia, that my mind was weaving Myra's fears into my own. And yet, as I lay awake in the silence of my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, just past midnight, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A single message. A blocked number. "Stop searching." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. Had Myra sent this? Or had I stumbled into something I was never meant to find? One thing was certain, I was closer to the truth. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. I should have listened. The message had been clear: stop searching. A warning, a final chance to walk away. But I had already come too far. 4 days, I hesitated, torn between fear and the need to know. Myra had been more than just a friend. She had been a part of me, woven into the fabric of my life. And now, she was a question without an answer. So I made a choice. One last attempt. I returned to her apartment, empty and untouched since the day she left. The weight of silence pressed against my chest as I sifted through the remnants of her life. Books she once loved, clothes left folded as if she might return, notes half-written and abandoned. Then, tucked between the pages of an old, dog-eared novel, I found it. A single photograph. Myra stood in the frame, her face partially obscured by shadows, but it was undeniably her. And beside her, someone else. A figure, barely visible, standing just behind her shoulder. It wasn't the darkness that unsettled me. It was the way she looked in the picture. Her expression was not one of joy or surprise, but something else. Recognition. As if she had known they were there. As if she had expected them. A sharp knock at the door shattered the quiet. My breath caught. No one was supposed to be here. Slowly, I approached, pressing my palm against the wood as if I could sense what waited on the other side. Silence. Then, a whisper. Low. Nearly inaudible. You weren't supposed to find this. My blood turned to ice. The voice was familiar, yet distant, stretched thin as if spoken through layers of fog. I stepped back, heart hammering. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the presence was gone. The door remained closed. No footsteps faded down the hall. But the air was different now, thicker, heavier. As if something unseen had lingered just long enough to let me know it was real. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't return to Myra's apartment. I didn't ask any more questions. Because I finally understood. Myra hadn't run. She had escaped. And whoever, or whatever, she had been running from had noticed me now, too. The next morning, I packed my things. Left the city. Started over somewhere new. I never told anyone why. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still feel it. A shadow at the edge of my vision. A whisper where there should be none. And on the worst nights, I hear her voice. Not in memory, not in dreams. Right outside my door. You should have stopped searching.